Let's give a big warm welcome to Speaker Dan Hawkins.
Jeff is right. We met long ago. Actually, it's kind of fun when you think about it. You get involved in the political arena and you go up to Topeka or wherever you go, whether you're here on the city council or the county commission. But I can relate just to being in the state house. The number of people I have got to meet that I would have never met at all in my life if I hadn't been involved in politics. So I always say we are truly blessed to have the opportunity to serve the people of our districts. And I know Jeff takes that very seriously. He has his whole career. He does a great job of taking care of his people in his district, and we all strive to do that. I would say even the Democrats strive to do that. We may not agree with what they think and where they want to go, but certainly they are serving their districts also. I just need to make sure that I get as many of them out of their districts and get our people in as we can. So, we're coming up on deadlines. Deadlines are awesome. Believe me, and when it comes to the legislative agenda, deadlines are the best thing that can ever happen. And we're coming up on that really quick. This week actually is really almost the last week. We actually have 2 days next week, Monday and Tuesday, of committee work, and then we go on the floor Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and we debate bills all day long on the floor for those 3 days. And then on Friday is our turnaround day, and that is the day when all of the House bills, any bill that has an HB on it has to go to the Senate, and anything that has an S on it has to come to the House. And if it's not ready to do that, then it dies, unless it's an exempt bill, which our tax bills are exempt bills, and our appropriation, Ways and Means bills are certainly exempt bills. And then we have the Fed and the state committee on both sides that is an exempt committee. So those are the only committees that have bills that are still alive on their side of the rotunda. So next week's a big week. We're going to be really debating a lot of things. The last time I was here, we talked a lot about taxes, and I really believed we would have been finished with the tax debate by now, but we're not. We are still working hard trying to make sure we got the votes. And next week is the last week for us to take up that veto override. If you remember, the governor vetoed our beautiful tax relief bill that we had, and we've really been kind of hamstrung with not having enough people there to be able to take a vote. Our margin as a supermajority is super thin. Actually, it's one. We have one over what we need. We have to have 84 on the House side. We've got 85, and the Senate needs to have 27, and they've got 28. What that means to us is we have to know that we have every single person there before we take up that override vote, because otherwise we'd probably lose it. It appears that next Tuesday will be that day. It has to be done by the 23rd. We had 30 days from the time the governor vetoed the tax bill for us to take it up in the House. It has to start in the House. If we can make that override happen, then it goes to the Senate, and the Senate has 30 days from the time they receive it to be able to get all their people together and hopefully override the governor as well. And, we've been kind of in a situation on the Senate side where we're one short. Ty Masterson, the Senate president, has been working literally nonstop, talking with people, trying to find that one last vote. He's even spent quite a bit of time talking with Democrats, some maybe a little bit more conservative Democrats, or Democrats that represent a district that actually that bill helps a whole lot. For instance, David Haley. I know he spent a lot of time talking with David Haley, who's in Wyandotte County. It's a lot lower income area, and quite frankly, the lower incomes really have a stake in this tax bill because the relief for the lower end is just huge. So we're going to continue working on that, and hopefully on Tuesday we can get that across to the Senate, and the Senate can start to work and hopefully get that done. We're just staying absolutely laser focused on that. I talked a little bit last time about our budget. Maybe not quite as much as I'd like to. I don't know how many of you have really seen a whole lot of information about our budget, but the governor, how our system works is the governor proposes a budget each year, and that's the budget we work off of. And we can cut our budget, or we can add to it, and then it goes back to her, and then she can do line item vetoes on that budget. Well, she proposed a budget was just absolutely mind-boggling. It was about $1.3 billion over last year's budget. $1 billion with B, $1 billion. That's massive. It's about 13.8% increase over last year's budget. That is a massive amount of spending, and it was truly most of her spending increase was in the form of what she called one-time increases. It was, she proposed building a brand new prison in Hutch. $337 million is what that would cost, which I'm actually kind of surprised that you can build a prison for $337 million, but that's the price tag that she had for it. It included $450 million just to set in a fund so someday when our pension bonds are callable that there would be money there to call. Well, why would we just put money, set it aside just for callable bonds? That's just crazy. We were not going to do that. We're going to put it to work. We need to put it to work. We can't just have it set and idle. And that's kind of what all of her, she was paying off some debt, but it was $1.3 billion. And so both Ty and I had instructed our Appropriates and Ways and Means Committee to literally axe all of her spending. She always talked about axing the tax. Well, what she's always done is axed our tax relief, but we're going to axe her spending because it's huge, massive. Yeah, thank you. It's a big deal. So right now, the Thai side, on the Senate side, they're going to start assembling their budget next week on Monday and Tuesday, and probably the following week they're going to be ready to actually have it on their floor and debate it. Ours is just a little bit further out. We're probably going to finish assembling our budget right around the 1st of March, and then we'll debate it within that next week. So we're going to be pretty close together as far as when the budgets come out. That's early. That is way early, comparatively speaking. Most of the time our budgets don't get out to the floor until almost the very last week of session. But we're really trying to speed things up and to make sure we have plenty of time to work our way through those problems that always arise whenever you're doing a budget. So look for that in the news as that comes out in the next couple of weeks. You'll see a lot about the budget. Probably have a lot of screaming. I know the governor's budget director is extremely upset that we're not doing exactly what the governor wants. Imagine that. The governor, we talk about this a lot. The governor says that she's the middle of the road. And about the only thing that happens in the middle of the road is you get run over. Quite frankly, that's what we want to do. We want to run over the governor in the middle of the road. But I'm just teasing there. She certainly has made it difficult because she talks about being bipartisan, and oh, by the way, in Kansas, if anything passes, it's bipartisan because we're a Republican state. So how can it not be bipartisan? So when she says that, it's really just disingenuous. But the governor talks a lot about how she compromises, and she hasn't compromised on a single thing. We literally, in that tax bill that we talked about the last time I was here, we literally gave her 4 out of the 5 positions were her positions. We had one position, and that was a single rate tax, and she vetoed it because she didn't want a single rate tax. So I don't know how you can say what she does is at all compromising or working across the aisle, as she says. And usually when she talks about working across the aisle, by the way, I don't even know why I'm saying this, but I just have a fun time talking about the governor. When she talks about working across the aisle, it's those two Republicans that literally vote with the Democrats every single time. That's the people she's working with across the aisle. Well, both of those really should be Democrats. So she wouldn't be really working across the aisle. But that's our governor. You know, we've had I want to get on to a couple of other things that are really important that just happened. This week, I don't know if you've followed, if you read any newspaper, you couldn't have missed it. Who all has heard about the canine dog bill that we just did? Yeah, that thing has gotten more coverage across the United States. I couldn't believe. I mean, most of the time, whenever we get coverage across the United States, they're mad at us. They're saying all kinds of bad things about us. Well, this time they're actually saying something good. But that was really in the scheme of things, we have lots of huge things to do. But that is one piece that I think most people can agree with. Number one, as a Speaker of the House, I want everybody to know that I support our military, our National Guard, our Kansas National Guard, Army National Guard, Air National Guard. I support our law enforcement totally. Our law enforcement and first responders are out there every single day putting their lives on the line for us. And the least thing we can do is to give them the support they need. Well, when you have a situation where a member of a canine member, a service animal, so to speak, of their department gets killed by somebody, that's going to make you stop and think about that. And that's exactly what we did. We were looking at it, and what we found out was the penalties for killing a canine, a member of the canine unit, is very small. Maximum fine of $5,000, maybe a jail sentence, but not a presumed jail sentence. So you may not even go to jail. You might get probation or something for killing that animal. It costs them a fortune, number one, to train an animal. Just to go buy the animal is anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000, and then you're going to have constant training day in and day out. Those canine units literally train when they're not out working. They're training, and dogs, just like people, take constant training. We have to, if we're going to be good at something, we have to train all the time. Our athletes, they train daily. Same thing with those dogs. Those dogs have to be trained all the time to stay sharp and to stay focused on what they're doing. And so they have a lot of money wrapped up in them. And so when I saw that, I said, we got to do something. We got to do something quick. So we started looking across the nation at what some of the laws were across the nation, and really found out some of the best laws were Florida and Georgia. And so what we did in this we call it Baines Law. What we did with that was we really modeled it after some of Florida, some of Georgia, and we increased those penalties. And probably for most of you, these don't make a whole lot of sense, because it doesn't to me either. To Kevin back there, he can tell you all about it. But it makes a level 3, I believe it's a level 3 non-person felony. Non-person, isn't it? I think. So a level 3 non-person felony if you injure and disable a dog or kill one of those dogs, or a horse, because we have horses in many of our sheriff's units across the state. There's horses used all across the state. So those animals, if you do that, you're going to get a level 3 non-person felony, which has a presumptive prison time attached to it. So you're going to get at least 90 days in jail, and could be clear up to 5 years in jail. In addition, the fine is much higher. It's a $10,000 plus restitution. You have to pay for the cost of that dog, plus all the training, even the cremation or whatever they do. any vet bills. All of that is a part of taking care of the expenses of that animal. So it ended up being a very interesting bill to work on, and we worked on it for about 3 weeks before we finished it, and then it passed overwhelmingly. I think we got 107 votes out of 125 votes in the House. So pretty much everybody was on board with that. It's now in the Senate, and I talked to the Senate President last week and said, hey, or actually this week, said, hey, you know, that's coming your way. It had a really good showing in the House, and so he's excited. He's excited to take it up in the Senate, so we should see that done. But it all started right here in Wichita with that dog that was killed here in Wichita. So that's just an interesting piece of legislation that you don't normally see something like that. We also had, you know, sometimes we have some things happen that's not so good when it comes to legislation. We lose some positions. Here in the city of Wichita, I don't know how many of you know about it, but we have tag readers well, I bet Jeff knows all about it. But we have tag readers out there on poles, and they're typically on Evergy's poles. And those are reading tags. They're loaded through a database, a nationwide database with tags of known vehicles that have been stolen. And sometimes they're loaded with information actually about the person who may have committed some type of heinous crime. Well, just recently, in fact, it's just this last week, here in Wichita, one of those tag readers picked up a guy that had committed murder, and they caught him. They caught him here in Wichita. So those tag readers are doing some awesome things. Well, one of our problems that we had was the Evergy had gotten sued in Missouri for having those tag readers, and they call them pole cameras, on their poles, and lost the lawsuit. And so they basically said, we don't want them on our poles anymore. And so I knew that was something we just couldn't allow. And so I went to Evergy and talked to them. This was back during last summer, and said, listen, really the city is really just interested in making sure that we can continue to do that, and they're willing to indemnify or hold you harmless legally if there was a lawsuit. So the city would actually be responsible for that suit. We thought we would be able to do it without doing a bill. And we went through negotiations for months, and it seemed like every time we thought we were close, another attorney would throw up a roadblock, and so we just didn't get it done. And finally, Evergy told us, they said, you know, if you want to do this, you can, but you're just going to have to do it through legislation. We're not going to be able to do it just contractually. And so we started down that road of developing a bill that would hold Evergy or the electric companies that it applied to, it would hold them harmless from any liability from those tag readers or pole cameras. We thought we had that done this last week, and we lost a key vote in a committee, and so it's probably not going to happen. And it's really sad that it's not going to happen, because it's something that's truly needed in our cities, in our big cities. Probably not so much of a big deal out in the rural areas, but here in the city and in Kansas City, Overland Park, all of the metro area up there, and Topeka, and the bigger towns, Hutchinson, it's a big deal. We need those. So we're going to probably have to start back from scratch next year on that, and hopefully next year we can do a lot better job of counting our votes and making sure we got the votes before we get there. So that was that vote happened yesterday, and I was a little bit upset at the result, because it's truly something that we needed. So I'm kind of picking things that we had talked about last time that have some new twists. Remember, we talked about Medicaid expansion, and I can talk about Medicaid expansion for hours, and you all know that because I've done that before. And I'm not planning on doing that today, and you can thank me. But what I am going to talk about is what we did instead. I've always said there's other things that we can do that are far more important than Medicaid expansion. And if you listen to the governor and her rhetoric is always about Medicaid expansion will solve all the ills. I even think it would solve, the unemployment crisis, according to her, which I don't see that, but she seems to think so. But the biggest thing they always talk about is rural health care and the fact that we have rural hospitals closing because we have not expanded Medicaid. And it's absolutely false that that's the case. Matter of fact, the statistics show that a state that has expanded Medicaid is just as apt to have hospitals closed in the rural areas as a non-expansion state. So it really doesn't matter where you are, because it's really not about Medicaid expansion. It's about that model. It's about the fact that it's very difficult for our rural hospitals to have enough people coming to them to keep them open. That's the problem. And so this year I said, listen, we can solve a portion of that problem. We can't solve the whole thing immediately, but the one thing we can do is we can go about raising the Medicaid reimbursement rates for hospitals and for doctors. And when we started studying that, it was really amazing. And the guy that I had working on it's Will Carpenter. You guys know him from El Dorado, actually from right outside of Towanda. He's a great guy. He's been in the social services arena, and he's been the chair of social services for 6 years. This year and last year he's been the chair of Fed and State, but I also have him as the vice chair of Health and Human Services because his knowledge is so great. And so he started working on it. And within the last couple of days, they came out with their recommendation. Well, what we found out as we studied that problem was it was amazing the differential between how much Medicare pays and how much Medicaid pays. So for instance, we could have an outpatient procedure code that costs $600, or that Medicare would pay $600 for, but Medicaid would only pay $40 for. That's huge. And so how many of those you want? We look at it, the same thing with doctors, physicians. There's a code out there. It's just a normal, everyday office visit code, 99213, which you go to your primary care physician and you got a snotty nose, they're going to code it as a 99213. So if you're going to pay cash for that service, you're probably going to pay somewhere around $120 here in Wichita. If you have insurance, they're going to discount that down to somewhere probably around $85 or $90. And if you have Medicare, it's going to be down at 80 or just a little bit lower. But if you have Medicaid, it's going to be 25. How many of those you want? If you're a doctor, you want to make your whole practice on Medicaid? Nobody does, and they can't. It's impossible for them to, which is also another reason why Medicaid expansion doesn't work. So let's throw another 300,000 people at a system that nobody wants because the reimbursement levels are so low. So what we did, we looked at the physician's reimbursement rate for Medicaid, and we're upping that, the recommendation, and it hasn't went through the whole process, but the recommendation is to increase that 15%. That's not enough. But we also can't afford to do it all at once. So the next 4 years, you will see us continually ratcheting up our Medicaid reimbursement rates for doctors and for hospitals. This year, our spend is going to be right at $40 million. That's $40 million all funds, federal and state, for Medicaid reimbursement rates. So I truly think once we start this process, you're going to see, number one, you're going to see the hospital say, this is more important than Medicaid expansion, and it truly is. And anybody that truly is going to analyze it and be truthful is going to say raising the Medicaid reimbursement rates is far more important than ever expanding Medicaid. So that's nice. It's nice that we can actually do something that's going to make a difference instead of always talking about what we're not going to do, which I've done that a lot. For 10 years, I've talked about we're not going to bring Medicaid expansion to this state. And I hope when I finish in 2026, I can still say Medicaid expansion is not in this state. So we'll keep working on that. So the last thing I want to talk about today is, and again, it has something to do, but not really much to do with Medicaid expansion, but it's our intellectually and developmentally disabled folks, and it's a waiting list. It's a waiting list for Medicaid for the IDD. That's intellectual and developmentally disabled is IDD, and then PD is physically disabled. We've had waiting lists for those folks ever since I've been here, clear back to 13. There was 1 year during Brownback's term when he got all of the physically disabled off the waiting list. It was down to 0. Not for very long, though. It hit 0, and probably within the next week, it was starting to climb back up. Well, with this governor, she literally has not wanted to put any money into that system, and we've been screaming about it for quite a while because she wants to expand Medicaid, but the people who are truly the neediest, the ones that Medicaid was built for, she doesn't care about doing away with that waiting list. There are people that have been on that waiting list for 13 years, and it's average 10 years. So you know that if you have a child that's going to be one of those children that's going to need that service, you put them on that waiting list when they're about 10 years old. That way, by the time they hit 2021, they're hopefully going to come off and be able to get services. I literally had about 10 of the IDD children and their parents in my office this week, and one of them had been on there 15 years, been on the waiting list 15 years. That is absolutely a travesty to think that you're going to expand something to all these people that could be working, but the people that truly need it, you're not going to take care of. So we literally hit the governor over and over and over this last year about that, and we were getting some traction. And you know, this governor, what she does, I don't know if you've noticed this, but if she thinks that we're getting traction, she's going to jump out in front of us. And that's what she did. She jumped out in front of us and she said, well, I'm going to do a governor's budget amendment, and I'm going to take 250 people off of that IDD waiting list. And so she put an amendment into our budget to do that. 250 is nothing. There's 300 goes on it every year. You take 250 out, what have you done? Nothing. It's still growing. It's not getting better. And so what we did, since she put that budget amendment out there, in the budget, we actually doubled that to 500. So it's going to cost us a lot more, but we believe that we're going to start really chipping away at this waiting list and get this to where it's manageable again. And a part of that bill that Will Carpenter did, he also put in there that waiting list can never be, right now it's at 8,000. It's got to be taken down below the 4,000 mark. So we're going to have to put a lot of work into it. But they've also done one other thing that we think is going to help a lot. So our Medicaid system, the way our Medicaid system works is we have these waivers. And the HCBS waiver is really the waiver for the IDD. And it's comprehensive. It's everything you could possibly need. Well, some of these people that are on this waiting list, they may only need 1 or 2 or 3 services instead of all of them. And so he has put a new waiver together called, I believe it's called the Community Support Services Waiver. Hopefully I got that right. And that's got 7 services in it, and we believe we can actually attack that waiting list and get a whole bunch of people off the waiting list that all they needed was just a few services, and they'll fit into that category. So we're really trying to attack that and to do right by those folks that we all know that we need to help take care of. They can't take care of themselves. We have to take care of them. But somebody that's able-bodied, they just need to go to work. Get out there and go to work. This is for people that can't do that. And so I'm pretty proud of Will. Many of you know him. Send him a note. Send him a note or an email and tell him thanks for all of his work, because he is working hard at trying to make sure that we take care of these folks that are truly needy and vulnerable. They are the most vulnerable in our state. So with that probably Yeah, we got a lot of time for questions. That's pretty cool. Most of the time, I don't have a lot of time for questions, but I also, this time, I didn't have that huge amount of information to dump on you. I really wanted to be targeted this time. So let's take a little time and answer some questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll go to the visitors. I think we have a member over here.
Hey, can you talk about the bill to amend the Kansas Constitution about the gun control and...
Gun control? Yeah, there's so Blake Carpenter, my Speaker Pro Tem, had been working on that. We've kind of shelved that just a little bit, and we're gonna take that up next year. So it's not gone. It will come back. It'll come up next year. You know, there's some things that we have to really, you know, we're coming up on an election cycle. And this election cycle is going to be won or lost in one area, and that's Johnson County. And I don't know if you realize it, but guns aren't liked very well in Johnson County. And so the rest of the state, they're loved. But we've got to make sure that we keep our people in Johnson County, and we can't do a bill that's going to put them in jeopardy and have a Democrat take their seat because of what we do in the House or the Senate. And so it's best for us to hold off to a non-election year, and that's what we'll do. We'll hold that back until next year, and then we'll work on that one next year. And it'll pass overwhelmingly. It's not going to be a problem passing it. It's actually a very good bill. Yeah. Thanks for the question, Jason.
Yeah, I have a question along over here. The reimbursement that you were talking about?
Yeah.
Does that have to do with that waiting list, where we could give those people more money?
No, the Medicaid reimbursement rate has absolutely nothing to do with the waiting list. That's a whole separate thing. So the way that waiver works, the HCBS waiver, is that we have basically said that we will put this much money to this number of people each year to get them off the waiting list. And what we have to do is to change that number, which is what the governor came out on her GBA and said, oh, okay, I'll take 250 off, and we said we're going to double it, and so we made it 500. That has nothing to do with that reimbursement stuff. That's totally different. So actually two separate pots of money.
Back on the utility pole tag reader issue, are there safeguards in there that will protect? I mean, can that be usurped by some other authority to kind of?
No, it's very tight. That is controlled, and I can't tell you the controlling agency. It's not. It's actually an organization outside of our state. It's a nationwide thing, because literally they load those tag numbers in all across the nation. But it's very tightly controlled. Nobody can get into that except for them, and they can't be used for you can't go in there and use that for anything except for identifying that tag because that vehicle has been stolen or something else. It could be, in this case, last week it was a murder. They knew that this murder had this tag on his car, and it showed up, and they caught him here in Wichita. Amazing thing. But it's very tight, very tightly controlled. If we had, I don't know if you all know Casey Slaughter. He's a captain here in the police force. He's over all of the property crimes, and he's the one I've really worked with on this whole situation, clear back into last year. Yep. Yeah.
I have a question about what status or what bills are there regarding transgender people and transgendering workers, and also how receptive are the newspapers about getting our side out as opposed to the government?
Yeah, well, I can tell you that the newspapers are not receptive at all to that. So last year we had a phenomenal year on that issue. We passed 3 different pieces of legislation on that. There was only one that we didn't get done, and that is the gender reassignment surgery on minors. Literally, they are They are out there doing that. They're a minor, a minor can't do it. You can't smoke, you can't gamble, you can't vote, but you can decide to change your gender. You can decide to do something that literally is going to impact your life for the rest of your life, and you don't even know if it's really what you need or not. I mean, it's amazing that it ever got to this point. And so we do have a bill. We have a bill, Representative Landwehr is working on it right now. We should see that, we should see that on the floor possibly next week. So we'll be voting on that. That will most likely pass overwhelmingly. Last year, now the Democrats didn't vote for it, but pretty much all of the Republicans voted for it, and we did 3 overrides on those situations. So we should be in good shape on that this year. Yep. Yeah, Deb.
So I have a really easy question for you. Haha. So we're getting lots of questions about all the illegals that are here.
Yeah.
And are you talking about the legislature, and is there money coming out in the state of Kansas for them for services?
So I cannot tell you how many are coming to Kansas. I don't have any idea. I do think there are some. There has to be. They're shipping them. They're literally shipping them wherever they can ship them to. And I would bet if they were shipping them anywhere, they'd probably ship them to Lawrence, because Lawrence seems to want to be a sanctuary city for almost everything. But that's even changed in Lawrence. Believe it or not, in the last election, there were 2 city councilmen that lost their race because of that situation, because Lawrence just went so far left. And now with all of this, all of the things that they've done, people are tired of it. They've got literally tent cities in Lawrence where the homeless are just camped out, and it hurts business. It hurts in a lot of different ways. So people are tired of it. I just don't have. They don't give us any information about who's coming to Kansas, so we don't have that information. I will see what I can find out as far as if there's any information about that, but I do not have any currently. Yep.
Yes, is there any way to get the Supreme Court out of determining school finance?
Yeah.
I mean, this is ridiculous. You guys pass the budget for school finance, and then the Supreme Court turns around and says, well, that's not enough money.
Yeah.
Can we change that?
Yeah, it's called an election. And, we actually, in the last 10 years, and I can't remember what the years were, but we have had 2 different elections where we tried. And there was one election where they really spent quite a bit of money trying to educate the votary. And if you remember, it was to try to take out all of them except for Caleb Stegall. And we lost miserably. We didn't even come close. So that's where it's going to go. It has to be done through a constitutional amendment, and that means we have to have the citizens that will pass it. And we didn't even come close the last time. Same thing. That has this really the makeup of the court has a lot to do also, not just with school finance, but with abortion. Literally, the Supreme Court has determined that we have a constitutional right in Kansas to have an abortion up to and including the day of birth. Now, we have a statute still on the books that says that abortion is banned after 22 weeks. So there's a 22-week ban out there that's on the books that has not been, well, knock on wood, it has not been challenged yet. It's still a good law. I do think that at some point in time you'll see the abortion advocates go after that law, but right now it is still on the books. So can we? Absolutely, but we have to get people to the poll and we have to vote for it. The legislature can't do anything about it because the courts have taken it over. It's really a bad deal. I think you probably all saw just last week that the court did finally release us from the Gannon case. Yeah, we were actually, I was really surprised that that was something that our Attorney General, Chris Kobach, did. He took it back to court, said, listen, they've done what they were supposed to do, release them from this case. And his argument was good enough, and he won. So, way to go, Chris. Yep.
Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
about the rural hospitals, I used to work in a rural hospital in Northwest Kansas. What I heard is that if you belong to CAH, Community Acute Hospital, if you lose money, Medicare will reimburse. On the other hand, if you make money, you have to pay it back to Medicaid. Am I right?
I don't understand what you said.
Not Medicaid will pay you if you lose money. Rural hospital. Oh.
Tell me what he said. I'm not understanding.
Medicaid will reimburse the rural county hospitals if they lose money.
No, well, they do. It's called a dish payment. It's called disproportionate share. But it's not just rural hospitals, it's all hospitals. So all hospitals, if they have uncompensated care, so they're losing, they're not getting any money for that. There's dish payments, but it doesn't cover 100% of it. It covers a portion of their losses from uncompensated care. And there's another, it's not just dish, it's also an HCAP, which is another piece of federal legislation that actually reimburses for uncompensated care. But Medicaid itself, no, it's actually something separate. It's disproportionate share payments from the federal government and the HCAP. Yep.
Thank you, David, for being here. I've heard at a meeting that a lot of the homeless people that are sleeping on the streets that aren't, who won't let them go to shelter because of their drug addiction, is there any mechanism to help these people?
So that's a great question. So at the state level, we wonder really, is that something that the state should get involved with? It's really a local issue. And right now, we're kind of erring towards the side of not getting involved. Because how do we do it? Do we just give out grants? What do we do? And, the city government here is wanting to build a massive homeless complex. And the one thing that you will see when they do that, build it and people will come. I'm serious. I'm serious. If you want to increase your homeless, build it and they will come. It happens everywhere they do that. Everywhere. So, I would say probably a good share of the people who are homeless are suffering from some form of mental illness. And a lot of them really don't want to be bothered. They just want to be left alone. But you can't leave them lay out on the street and freeze in 0-degree weather either. So you've got to have some homeless shelters, but I don't think you want to build something like our city council is talking about right now, where you're just going to house them 365 days a year. I think you're going to find that's really a bad idea. But that's what they're talking about, and I'm not on the city council, so I would say if that's what they want to do, they need to figure out how to fund it. But actually what they want to do is they want us to fund it. And right now, we're not seeing a whole lot of support for funding that in Topeka. There's not a whole lot of support for that.
Yeah, I want you to clarify something. The waiting list for Medicaid.
Yeah.
I assume they're getting care. I assume it's private pay. So are you just transferring them from private pay to public pay?
Yes, sir.
Or are you actually giving them an additional benefit?
So I need to do a little bit more clarification for you beyond that. So when we talk about the wait list, we're talking about the 8CBS wait list. That's the Home and Community Services wait list. So these are people who are waiting to have care services, have somebody that comes in and takes takes care of their needs that they can't in their home instead of putting them in an institution. It's much less expensive to take care of them at home than putting them in a nursing home or some type of institutional setting. That gets very expensive. And so they have the health care. So they already have the Medicaid health part. They just don't have those home and community-based services supports that they're needing. And so where are they at? Most of them are probably being taken care of by their parents. So they may be, 25, 30 years old, and they're still being taken care of by their parents instead of being able to, instead of the parents being able to let them go and live in some other setting and have the care provided by the state. So it is a transfer in a sense, because probably the parents are paying for it all right now for an adult child. These are all adult children, by the way. They aren't children anymore, but they're adults that can't take care of themselves. That's who they are. Good, great question. Yeah.
Yeah, so just, we're transferring from private to public pay.
Yeah, you are. Yep.
I don't know if the timing is right for the governor's situation, but is there any consideration of the legislature for a constitutional amendment to change the way the Supreme Court justices are appointed?
Yeah, so if Ty Masterson was here, that's probably one of the biggest issues that he always talks about is the only way we're ever going to solve the Supreme Court issue is to change the way they're selected. Kansas is a weird state when it comes to selection. It's even beyond weird. I mean, we're an anomaly. Basically, there's a nominating commission made up of attorneys. And everybody loves attorneys. And, sorry, Kevin. He's an attorney too. I might get shot here real soon. I can't remember, how big's that nominating commission, Kevin, or do you know? I think it's 7 or 9, something like 9. And so, that's right. The majority are elected by the attorneys, and then there are 4 who are lay people, just like you and me. So typically, the only people that get on that commission are the more liberal attorneys, and so they pretty much control it. And what does the governor get when it comes to her 3? They have to find 3 people that they send to her, and then she gets to pick one. Generally, they're liberal. I mean, if you look at our Supreme Court, Caleb's the only conservative of the bunch. The rest of them are all fairly liberal. Now, in some way, we don't know exactly how this court's going to react on some of these issues, because almost all of them are new since those decisions were handed down. In fact, I think we've got either 3 or 4 new justices since the Hodes decision was handed down on abortion. So we kind of wonder, and I think you'll see our Attorney General probably force this issue at some time. I think he would like to get another case in front of him having to do with abortion, just to see what they'll do. And really kind of the same thing with the education issue. They actually haven't made a decision. How long ago was the last Gannon? That was probably back in 14 or 15, the last Gannon? Somewhere around there. So it's been a long time since those decisions have been handed down and we have new justices. And so we really don't know what these new ones will do. And they have handed down some decisions that we liked. Believe it or not, there have been some decisions that came down that, wow, we were astonished. So I think time will tell. Those things will all, we do have a case, an abortion case before them right now. It's that dismemberment abortion is still in there. They haven't finished that. And so we may see something come out on that one. But truly, until we change the way justices are appointed, because really the governor has complete, with her nominating commission, she has complete control. Until we can get to where either we have direct elections, which probably will never happen on that, More likely is the federal model where the Senate confirms. That's probably the best situation we can ever get to is, the governor nominates whoever she wants to or he wants to, but the Senate always has the ability to confirm. But getting there is hard. We've not had the votes to be able to do that. It takes us 84 and 27, 84 in the House and 27 in the Senate for a constitutional amendment. And I think the best we've had is like 77 in the House. So we still have a ways to go. And who knows what will happen in the next election. Maybe we'll come back and have an even bigger supermajority after this next election, and we'll be able to do some things we haven't been able to do as of the last 4 years. So.
All right, here we have one last question.
Okay.
Yeah, Dan, can you give us an update on asset forfeiture reform?
Yeah, so that actually was heard in Judiciary in the House this week. I don't think that they have passed it out of committee yet, but they may have. I mean, there's so many bills really being worked on right now. They may have actually passed it out. We anticipate having that on the floor next week. From what I've been told, and I haven't seen what the compromise was, but they really worked hard to make sure that our law enforcement was a part of it, that they agreed with it, and the end result, I was told, Tony Mativi, our KBI director, is supporting, and so we think we probably got a pretty good product, but I have not read it yet. I've just talked to Stephen Owens and Susan Humphreys. They're two of them that are intimately involved with that, and so we should have something on the floor, and this is long overdue. We've been messing around with asset forfeiture for what, 7, 8, 9 years? It's been a long time. Sometimes things move slow. Yep, but we should have something next week to vote on. Absolutely. Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you.